Coming up, freak shows, harmless entertainment, or shameless exploitation. Deformed, disfigured, yet irresistible to millions who paid money to stare at the people known as freaks.
I was born to be in the freak show. When I come here, I felt very good about myself.
But while many found freak shows amusing, others considered them inhumane.
The whole question comes down to exploitation or non-exploitation.
Men standing 8 feet tall, women covered with tattoos. They were among the oddities that made freak shows a major attraction for more than a century. But in post-war America, social reformers declared that freak shows have no place in a civilized society and should be shut down. It set off a dispute between unlikely adversaries, with the so-called do-gooders on one side and the very performers they were trying to protect on the other. Join us for Circus Freaks and Sideshows.
A century after its heyday, crowds still come to Coney Island, America's legendary playground by the sea. This spit of land off Brooklyn, New York, is where freak shows reached the height of their popularity.
We've got the show if you've got the dime.
Hosting as many as 8 separate sites. Today, only 2 still exist here, gamely attempting to recapture the glory of summers past.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are in Coney Island in front of the Circus Museum. Freaks, wonders, and curiosities.
Freak shows tell us something very important about the human condition, especially in this new century. Everything today is virtual. Everything's on a screen. Everything's on a monitor. It's email. It's don't get up close and friendly with anybody. Sideshow blows past all of that. They demand that you be right there, that it be right in your face. That's the type of entertainment that a sideshow is. It's visceral, it gets you in your gut. It makes you laugh, it makes you applaud, it makes you think you're going to puke. It's got all of the impact of a big budget special effects movie.
We have to understand this experience as the people who were in it understood it, and not from a modern day repulsion.
Ladies and gentlemen, get your tickets and go now. The show is continuous. It's never out. It's never over. It goes on all the time.
The origins of the freak show date back to the 1840s, when industrialization in America creates unprecedented leisure time for the masses and spurs Americans to indulge the pursuit of happiness. As a result, new forms of public entertainment arise, including establishments known as dime museums.
Dime museums are the grandparents of all the museums we have today. Although they wouldn't want to admit it, that includes not only Smithsonian, but also Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Dime museums offer patrons exhibits of wild animals, exotic artifacts, wax figures, and human curiosities. Nowhere is the dime museum phenomenon more entrenched than in New York City, a burgeoning center of industry and immigration. Phineas Taylor Barnum, a showman poised to become the father of the freak show, owns the city's most popular exhibit hall, the American Museum.
Although dime museums existed in the country before Barnum's American Museum, what he was an absolute genius at was taking an idea, gilding it in some manner or another, sending out advance men, professional fans, professional enthusiasts, many times, into society to generate excitement for a new exhibit that might be coming in. So he really embraced a lot of the early ideas of advertising and advanced promotion.
P.T. Barnum's career as a showman began in the 1830s when he bought the rights to exhibit Joyce Heth, purported to be 161 years old and George Washington's nurse.
Joyce Heth was his first challenge, and he found that he could successfully market the concept of a 161-year-old nursemaid to George Washington and get people to come, pay a fee to listen to Joyce Heth sing, tell stories about her early rearing of George Washington, and people left with something. They left sort of fascinated by it. They were intrigued by the concept of, could this actually be? Is it a possibility that somebody could live to this age? And it was up to you to decide.
Barnum's exhibition of Joyce Heth earned him a handsome profit. But when she died, doctors examining her determined that she was only 80 years old and a fraud. The revelation bothers neither Barnum nor his audience. The public would accept humbug or a fraud in the presentation of a curiosity as long as it was entertaining.
A lot of people think that Barnum was the man who said there's a sucker born every minute. Anybody who spends more than 5 minutes studying P.T. Barnum realizes immediately that would never have been a line that crossed Barnum's lips. The essence of Barnum's success was the fact that he understood his public very often better than the public understood itself.
Barnum learns two fundamental principles in his association with Joyce Heth. First, freaks are not born, but rather created. And secondly, the promotion of a curiosity is just as important as the curiosity itself. Barnum applies these lessons to the American Museum and establishes the practices and patterns of the freak show for all to follow.
Barnum was the one who realized that unless you put as much entertainment as possible in one space, it was never going to keep people coming back. And the essence of the Dime Museum, just like the essence of the amusement parks today, is you have to make people come back. And what with all the leisure time in the 1800s, that was a cinch for a man like Barnum, a man of his genius.
Barnum transforms the Dime Museum into a lively entertainment center. He advertises through broadsides, banners, and brass bands, but nothing is as effective as word of mouth. His most talked about attractions include the Fiji mermaid, pure humbug created by sewing a monkey's torso to a fishtail, and live, authentic freaks such as Chang and Eng, the original Siamese twins, who still tour after marrying 2 sisters and fathering 23 children between them. William Henry Johnson, a man with a misshapen head, who Barnum bills as Zip the What Is It, and who enjoys the longest career of any freak show attraction until his death in 1926. And Anna Swan, the 7'11" Nova Scotia giantess who marries another giant, Captain Bates, and thus they become the world's tallest married couple.
The performers that exhibited themselves were paid, and actually paid well. Often they were boarded on the upper floors of the American museums. And not all of Barnum's human curiosities stayed with him a very long time. Barnum liked change rather regularly, so it was that type of change that kept the museum dynamic.
And kept the public coming back for more. They stare in awe as Barnum's freaks perform routines, tell their life stories, and answer questions. In 19th century America, gawking at people who are born differently is not only socially acceptable, it is considered family entertainment. Medical science, in its infancy as an organized profession, has yet to classify freaks as diseased, thus allowing people to enjoy the show free of guilt. The explanations scientists offer for why freaks exist sound as far-fetched as, well, humbug.
In the late 19th century, one of the explanations of why somebody might be born different, that is, with what we might call a disability today, was the theory of maternal impression. And there were variations of the theory, but one was that if a woman was pregnant and saw something that scared her, that the experience that scared her would be revealed in the baby she gave birth to. So if she were scared by a stallion, for example, she might give birth to a child who looked like a horse.
Such theories only add to the lurid appeal of Barnum's human curiosities. They become the public's favorite exhibits and make the American Museum the first bona fide freak show and New York's most popular attraction.
Barnum was so successful as a dime museum operator with his American Museum in Manhattan that in the first 5 years of operation, as many people passed through the turnstiles of that collection as there were people in the United States. That's a better track record for the first 5 years of operation than even Disney World had.
Among the freaks that P.T. Barnum exhibits at the American Museum, the most famous one is the midget, General Tom Thumb.
Tom Thumb is probably the most famous of Barnum's curiosities because we still can connect to the wondrousness of a very tiny person.
In 1842, Barnum discovers a bashful little 4-year-old boy named Charles Stratton. The child, who had stopped growing before he turned 1, is not even 2 feet tall. Unsatisfied with the true story, Barnum changes Stratton's age to 11 and alters the boy's place of birth from Bridgeport, Connecticut to London, England, to appeal to Americans' preference for European attractions. Finally, Barnum changes Stratton's name to Tom Thumb after the legendary dwarf knight in King Arthur's court, and for good measure, gives the boy the rank of general while tutoring him to become an entertainer. Within weeks, Barnum creates what he advertises as a perfect man in miniature, not an ill-formed, offensive to look at dwarf.
Tom Thumb didn't challenge the sensibilities of people. He was not perceived as grotesque. He was adorable and interesting. He was a great performer. He could capture an audience and sing and dance, and he spoke beautifully.
Tom Thumb becomes an instant sensation and the talk of all New York. In 1844, Barnum takes him on the first of several highly successful tours of Europe, where he performs to the delight of royalty, most notably Queen Victoria, who showers him with gifts. Little Tom Thumb loves every minute of it.
Stratton took to the business. He understood immediately what it was his audience wanted. That's why he had such a successful audience with Queen Victoria. Even as a child, he understood how to be a child and what, as a child, an audience would be impressed with, how to act the little man.
Stratton plays the little man so well, he becomes Barnum's partner. When the tiny performer dies at the age of 46, he is a millionaire, complete with mansion, yacht, and horses. His rise from a shy little boy to a world-class celebrity becomes a freak legend.
Tom Thumb was the greatest exhibit of them all, mainly because Barnum made him the greatest exhibit of them all.
Barnum's enormous success at creating Tom Thumb in particular, and freaks in general, leads him to expand the venues in which they appear. In 1871, he forms the first of several alliances with various circus promoters, most notably James Bailey, to take his museum exhibits and curiosities on tour. He sets them up alongside the Big Top to entertain crowds before the main show begins. As a result, Barnum invents the Sideshow.
Although Sideshow, much like we'd recognize it today, had existed with circuses in a small way prior to Barnum, what Barnum realized intimately was that he could transpose that museum experience to circus. Barnum, in the way he did everything, made it much bigger, huge compared to what everybody else was doing. In fact, the posters from the time always show Barnum's lineup of sideshow attractions just stretching off into the distance, dozens and dozens of acts.
Now audiences in the heartland who had never been to a big city dime museum can stare in wonder at not only Zip, the What Is It, and Anna the Giantess, but also Charles Tripp, the Armless Wonder, and Madame de Vere, the Bearded Lady.
The Barnum and Bailey Circus, the greatest show on earth, was coined.
Hurry, hurry, step this way.
The sideshow was starting to evolve.
2 nickels, 1 dime at...
In 1893, 2 years after Barnum's death, The sideshow makes a significant advance at the Columbian Exposition in Chicago. The most popular attraction at this World's Fair is the Midway Plaisance, an amusement area featuring the first Ferris wheel in the country, games of chance, concession stands, and exhibits of freaks and exotic peoples.
Those showmen realized, you know, there's a benefit to concentration. There's a benefit to putting it all in one place. There's a benefit to, in a way, learning from Barnum, who put it all in one place. Once they realized the money in that, the benefit to that, the sheer joy and outrage and pleasure for the public and themselves in all of that, the amusement parks were born, traveling carnival was born, and it's been history and the future ever since.
By the turn of the 20th century, amusement parks spring up in America's major cities, becoming the newest showcases for freak shows. The most prominent ones are on New York's Coney Island. Audiences there consist mostly of immigrant laborers escaping teeming tenements for the breezy pleasures of what the New York Times describes as Sodom by the sea.
It's an audience where not everybody speaks English. So what type of entertainment works? Well, if people don't even understand the language that's being spoken, as long as every 5 minutes somebody eats fire, swallows a sword,
hit a bone,
or hammers a nail into their head, believe it or not, who cares if you understand the language?
The first major amusement park at Coney Island to launch a freak show is Dreamland, the vision of Samuel Gumpertz, a showman considered the Barnum of the seaside playground. Dreamland's most popular attraction is Lilliputian, or Midget City, a village Gumpertz builds to scale for the 300 little people who live there year-round, complete with their own fire and police departments.
It's a very popular attraction. Unfortunately, Dreamland burns to the ground in 1911. It is all over. The politicians who own it decide they're not going to rebuild. The manager, however, the hero of our story, Samuel Gumpertz, acquires the property, puts up a tent while the smoldering ruins are still there, while the ground is almost too hot to walk on. And he creates what to this day is the mother of all sideshows, the Dreamland Circus sideshow. And that is where the theatrical art form of sideshows gets perfected, gets developed into the 10-in-1 circus sideshow.
In 1911, Samuel Gumpertz, Coney Island's answer to P.T. Barnum, opens the Dreamland Sideshow on the smoldering grounds where the Dreamland amusement park had burned down. Gumpertz's show enjoys tremendous success. By 1920, as many as 30,000 patrons a day take in the 10-cent, 20-minute show of his freaks and curiosities. Gumpertz constantly adds new attractions and soon has more exhibits than any sideshow in the history of the business. Inspired by his success, other sideshows open on Coney Island, transforming this beach community into a mecca for such entertainment. But with an influx of competition, the stock of legitimate freaks runs thin.
David Rosen, the owner of the Wonderland Circus sideshow here in this building in the 50s, is the man who really comes on strong faking the acts. He's the guy who takes identical twin sisters, puts a girdle on them under a big dress, claims they're Siamese twins, which they're not, gets away with it for a while until one day they get fed up, have an argument on stage, split up on stage, and quit the show.
The Coney Island sideshows perfect what Barnum began, establishing the 10-in-1, the standard freak show format that lasts for decades.
But 10-in-1 is an all-live show where live performers do 10 different acts that perform continuous all day long. So the show doesn't have a plot. The audience could come in at any point. It's continuous admission. You stay 45 minutes to an hour until the show you walked in on comes around again, the same act.
In Carney lingo, the classic 10-in-1 begins with a ballyhoo, a free exhibition given outside a sideshow to attract a crowd, or tip. A string of garishly painted canvases known as a banner line stretches out in front of the sideshow, catching the eye of a casual passerby. Johnny Mia is the last of the old-time banner painters.
Your two key ingredients when you're cooking up this very colorful cake are sex and violence. You have to appeal to the Freudian side of their brain. You need to give them something that's creepy and weird, and maybe I shouldn't see it at all. And that's the sell.
The banners draw the crowd's attention to the talker.
We've got a cow with 3 eyes.
A man mistakenly called a barker by those not in the business. He stands at the center of the ballyhoo platform, delivering his rapid patter, trying to get the crowd to buy tickets.
They're all in here from one end. All right, come on in. To the other. Just as Mother Nature put them on Earth.
I want them all to dream about you when they go home tonight, so they'll always remember how pretty you are.
Got a chicken in there with a man's face, born with no beak.
The talkers are the highest paid people in the sideshow. A lot of them work on percentage of the gross.
Show you've ever seen.
Talkers are the key. They get the people in there.
As a boy, Bobby Reynolds was so mesmerized by the talkers he saw on Coney Island that he became one himself for his own sideshows.
Histories, mysteries. On the inside of our show, you're going to see dozens of unusual, strange, bizarre people. Franklin Tinney, a man with 3 legs, 16 toes, real human shrunken heads, Fiji mermaid, freaks and curiosities, the likes in which no one has ever seen before. They're here, they're real, and they're on the inside.
Can you sing a nice little song? Is that all of it?
Yeah.
To convince the audience that what they'll see on the inside is real, some of the working acts, like fire eaters or snake charmers, join the talker on the bally platform and perform. Johnny Mia swallowed swords to entice the crowd.
And here we have a sword measuring 27 inches from the hilt down here to the tip. When this one's swallowed, it winds up way down here at the base of the stomach. But because this is History's Mysteries, we're going to do something even stranger and even more mysterious, because today, for this show, I'm going to attempt to double my body directly in half with that piece of steel still inside of me. Are you ready?
I'll have him followed by Pauline Paul. He sealed the girl boy. If you'll notice, the right side of the body of that life-size photograph is that of a muscular male, while the left side has all the features of a perfectly formed female.
After this initial performance, the talker turns the tip, or persuades the crowd to come in with the help of a shill, a sideshow employee planted in the crowd who rushes to buy a ticket, encouraging others to follow suit.
Ladies go, the men go, and the children go, but I can't.
Once inside, another talker goes down a stage, introducing the spectators to each of the 10 acts. A crowd favorite was always Melvin Burkhart, now 93, and once billed as the anatomical wonder, the original human blockhead.
I'm going to show you why they call me the human blockhead. I take a common, ordinary spike and drive it into my head, something like this. Uh-oh. Dull, must have forgot to sharpen it. Uh-oh, hit a bone. But what can you expect out of a bonehead? No, I'm not going to bleed. I guarantee if I bleed any blood, it'll be red. Once you get that in there, it's really very simple. All you have to do is be simple enough to do it, and I'm just the guy who can do it, too. Of course, you don't have to be crazy to do this, but it helps. That shows to go you what some people will do to keep out of work.
The blow-off, an unadvertised attraction offered for the price of an additional ticket, ends every show. It's meant to clear out one crowd and make way for another by showing them something especially unusual. The blow-off can be anything from a jar of pickled punks, the term for a real or fake two-headed baby resting in formaldehyde, to an illusion like the headless body.
You've got a cow with 3 eyes, 3 horns, and 3 nostrils.
The 10-in-1 sideshow reaches the height of its popularity between the world wars. During this period, hundreds of sideshows crisscross the country as part of circuses, amusement parks, and carnivals. Everywhere the 10-in-1s appear, they shock and amaze crowds.
The first question everybody asks is, why do you do that? They ask it of the born freak, and it kind of means one thing. They ask it of the working act, and it means something else. The born freak looks exactly the way you see them on that platform. They can do nothing else with the way they look. And the fact they've chosen a sideshow to make their living, that's their choice. The working act is something else entirely.
It was a good way to make a living without having to go out and be it. Well, I always said, if I go out and take another job, I'm just a bum. Here, I'm a star. So here's where I'm going to stay.
I wanted to do these weird, bizarre things. I like the idea of being hammy and performing for people and being applauded and laughed at and so on.
But not everyone is laughing and applauding. In 1932, Hollywood releases the movie Freaks.
They'll make her one of us. A loving cup,
a drama starring some of the most prominent sideshow acts in the business. The movie bombs. The negative response reflects a growing change in the public's perception of freak shows.
One of the reviewers in the New York Times says, we're not sure we should show this at the movie theater or at the hospital. So they're living at this time when the delegitimization of the freak show is something that's occurring.
Now, folks, step right this way to the bigger...
The delegitimizing of the freak show results from advances in medical science. Researchers discover cures and treatments for what causes freaks, not only reducing their numbers, but changing how the public reacts to them. For many, pleasure turns to pity once they find out, for example, that a pinhead has microcephaly, a midget suffers from osteogenesis imperfecta, and a giant is afflicted with acromegaly. This major shift in the public's attitude towards freak shows sparks efforts to close them down, a move the freaks strongly oppose.
All of the bugaboo comes down to one word, and the word is freak. Now, what is a freak? The whole question comes down to exploitation or non-exploitation. Now, not every small person, not every deformed person is a freak. A freak is somebody with a deformity who chooses to become an entertainer, who makes a choice. And why do they make that choice? Well, because not every handicapped person wants to stay hidden at home, or wants to, on the other hand, wants to rise above their handicap and become a doctor or lawyer. One of the traditional job opportunities open to somebody with a handicap is to become an entertainer.
Becoming an entertainer offers born freaks the means to make a lucrative living, their first line of defense against those who seek to close sideshows down.
The attitude by and large from the showmen, from not only the managers, but all the way down to the performers, the born freak performers, was almost universal as, stay out of the way of my money. I have as much right to make a living as you do. And if you think I'm being exploited, you've obviously never seen my paycheck.
Just as important as a means to make a living, the sideshow offers freaks a way of life much more hospitable than any they might find in an institution.
It provided them a community of people that were, in the immortal words of the film Freaks, one of us, one of us. It was that camaraderie, the idea that there were other people out there that had physical peculiarities, And there was this bonding, this wonderful bonding of those people.
I now declare you legally married as man and wife.
Say, but who's going to be the boss of the family? You are, honey.
It was, we can stand on our own 2 feet, we can make a living, and we can hold our heads up. We're not on welfare, we're not on any public assistance, and we don't want people to feel sorry for us.
From the freak's perspective, if anyone's being exploited, it's the audience.
My stock analogy for this is simply, if you walk down a street and you see somebody with 3 legs, I defy you not to turn around and look at them. You're going to look. There's nothing wrong with looking at that person. It's human nature. This is why all things unusual, including this program, have an audience, because you want to see something different.
Despite the efforts of many, the freak shows remain open. But what changes in public perception can't accomplish, the grim economic realities of the amusement business render inevitable. The rising costs of mounting a freak show in the last half of the 20th century, including transportation, housing, insurance, work permits, payroll taxes, and fairground fees, increasingly make them prohibitive, especially when compared to amusement park rides, which have much lower overhead and quicker turnover.
We've got a pig with an elephant's trunk. We've got a cow with 3 eyes. 3 eyes.
With profit margins slimmer than the living skeleton, most freak shows have no choice but to close down.
The people who are running sideshows are in show business, emphasizing the business, and if they're not making a profit anymore, then why do them? So sideshows essentially die out across America. They're all gone by the 1970s.
Who else wants to do it? First of all, the carnival owners won't let you in there because they got so many rides, number one. You got the political incorrect, or you got the humaniacs. You can't have a freak animal show no more. I got a 5-legged cow I'm afraid to bring out. It's a Elsie, and they used to come in, oh, that poor cow, 5 legs. I says, you realize what that cow would be if it didn't have 5 legs? And they say, what? McDonald's.
As the targets of reformers and the victims of economics, the number of freak shows steadily decline in the last half of the 20th century until only a few remain today.
The big old 10-in-1 circus sideshow and carnival sideshows of old are almost completely gone. In their day, there would have been hundreds of those shows, hundreds of carnivals touring the United States. Now you're lucky if you can find a handful, and most of them are museum shows, shows where there are not live performers at all.
A survey of current sideshows indicates that each in their own way seeks to carry on the traditions of this nearly bygone but bizarre form of American popular culture.
Welcome to Coney Island, ladies and gentlemen.
One of the museum shows still in operation belongs to Bobby Reynolds, a sideshow veteran of more than 50 years. A quick tour of some of his exhibits echoes back to the freak show's roots.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the original Fiji mermaid. It was sold to Barnum in the early 1800s. Yes, Fiji mermaid, a fake, but a good one. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a real human shrunken head. Now, the way they shrink heads is they cut your head off, take the flesh off of the skull, sew it up, boil it in water, and after they do that, they put salt and hot sand in the neck till they get it down to the desired size, and then they smoke it like you would a piece of beef jerky or ham. This little animal is stranger than the Tasmanian devil, the swamp monster from the Isle of the Halamalagula. But actually, it's the ass end of a deer, but I say it's stranger and more fearful than a Tasmanian devil. Wouldn't give up show business, never, it's my life.
Across the street from Bobby Reynolds' museum stands his spirited rival, Sideshow by the Seashore. Opened in 1985 with a grant from the NEA and funding from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs.
Hi, I'm Eek, the geek, the man who tattooed his face with space. For history's mysteries, welcome to the Sideshow.
The intention is to be the only place left in America that runs an authentic 10-in-1 circus sideshow. Not cutting corners, not cheating, all live acts, doing the proper format, running continuous admission. So it's not just something to read about in the history books, that you actually have one place left in America that still does it the way they are meant to be.
Woo! I'm hammering it in there all the way back, stopping just a 1/16 of an inch away from my spinal column. Woo! Woo! There's one.
As nearly the last of their kind, the freaks of Sideshow by the Seashore perform as if on a mission, embodying the spirit of their predecessors.
I feel that I was born to be in the freak show because I'm small developed. It helps my self-esteem. Yeah, when I come here, I felt very good about myself.
Sideshow is my love. It is the love of my life, and I view it as my career. It's my profession. I'm very proud of what I do. And I'm also preserving an American tradition that has been going on uninterrupted for many, many years.
Now, hey! I felt good. Look at the little nail indentations on my back.
We got things going in the mid-'80s by reviving the whole concept of a 10-in-1. Then Jim Rose comes along, takes it outside the context of an amusement park or a circus, and enters the rock and roll circuit.
Thrills, chills, and Dr. Bills. A ticket's good for a seat, but you'll only use the edge. High-flying, bone-jarring excitement. And now, an exclusive for the History Channel. I'm going to bite into an apple, and we're going to have an H cut into it with a chainsaw.
Jim Rose, an ex-street performer from Seattle, forms his own freak show in 1992 in an attempt to update the format.
It was very calculated to go after a young audience. I wasn't relying on people's nostalgia. I had to go for those that had never seen it. And the best way to reach them is through rock and roll.
Higher! Higher for Vegas! Listen to this crowd! It's a video, hires. Yes! Take a look at her back. Take a look. Watch it register the shock. Oh, you gotta love it. This.
Rose's odd ensemble of misfits and marvels plays the '92 Lollapalooza Tour, featuring the best bands in the alternative rock scene, and later opened for edgy performers like 9 Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson.
Throw the lettuce!
I had to deliver. I had to have a 10-ring circus. Things happening everywhere. You need a swivel on your neck for this show because they were used to MTV Edit. And I think I'm the first live show, theater, or anything that ever understood the MTV Edit and gave a world-whipping, fast-paced show.
Rose's Circus is an instant hit with the youthful audience, but what was innovative and provocative in the early 90s barely raises an eyebrow today. Rose personifies the daunting challenge the remaining sideshows face to stay relevant and vital to new and ever more sophisticated audiences.
What I sold thousands of tickets to in '92 is now your next-door neighbor, a pierced and tattooed kid. The challenge of framing a show that is relevant is one that I don't know if I'll ever get over. Marketing changes. Everything, if I tried to sell the show like I did in '92, it wouldn't work. So for me, it's a constant changing field as you watch and keep an eye on trends for marketing.
As a new century begins, the Sideshow faces an uncertain future.
Predicting the future of Sideshow is a very dangerous exercise, as I think anybody in the sideshow business would be the first to tell you. Perhaps it's in television or some form of it. Perhaps it's online. Perhaps it'll continue in the clubs. I think there's definitely a future for live performance. It's what attracted humanity to these odd and bizarre acts in the very, very beginning. As long as there was somebody who was willing to stand up and go, look at me, for a price. That's what Sideshow started in, and I think that's what it'll always be.
Freak shows thrived on their ability to showcase performers who couldn't be seen anywhere else. But as television expands the boundaries of what's acceptable entertainment, the few remaining sideshow operators say it's far more difficult to find original acts. Like talk show producers and pro wrestling promoters, freak show impresarios are faced with a daunting challenge, coming up with new ways to shock audiences that have pretty much seen it all. To discover more about this and other topics, please visit our search engine at historychannel.com.